My why is motivating people to live well and give back. So through oral health, we can help them be healthier, but not just through oral health, through box breathing. We get them in our chair, and so we have an opportunity to talk about supplements with our patients too, and just very basic stuff like, a vitamin D and a multivite. Like, we're not going to get too far off the beaten path, but just basic stuff that can make a difference for our patients. So motivating people to live well, and then motivating people to go and do something.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dental Economist Show. I'm your host, Mike Huffaker. On this episode, I'm joined by Jan Jaffer, CEO of TREC, a group of dental clinics in and around Calgary. In addition to building a strong team culture focused on driving positive outcomes for patients, Jan is a huge believer in the power of giving back, repeatedly volunteering his time as a dentist through trips to remote parts of the world like Guatemala and Tibet. Jan, thank you for joining. Welcome to the show.
Mike, thanks for having me. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, really excited to have you on. Before the show started, we were talking about it a little bit, but I start to nose around beforehand about some of the guests that I have on the show. And I just want to pass this feedback along. I had asked a number of people who have had interactions with you, like, hey, anything I should know? And the common thread was, he's just a really great guy that really believes in what he's doing. So I just wanted to share that because it's always nice to hear positive things about the efforts that we're putting out there in the world, and it's been noticed. So
yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, thank you, and thanks for asking, and whoever said those nice things. I mean, I really appreciate it.
For sure. I think a lot of it kind of stems from your philosophy and the fact that you eat and breathe the culture that you've created with TREC. My understanding is TREC actually is an acronym kind of for your core values. Can you share what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So TREC, I mean, yeah, it is our four values. We, put it together kind of, we were growing and we said, hey, we need something that kind of connects us. And so TREC is our four values: teamwork, respect, exceptional dentistry, and continuous and never-ending improvement. And for us, we always start with, we say the values are an order of importance. So we do believe that teamwork comes first, and then respect. And then, dentistry is what we do, but, we're part of a service organization, a service industry, and there's lots of dentists out there, right? I mean, one thing that we know both in, all across North America, Canada and the US, there's a dentist on every corner. And so if they don't like you, they can find somebody else. That's definitely not a problem. So why is it that you're different? And so we feel that, the teamwork and the culture that we put together makes the difference, and how we treat people, right? I mean, ultimately, we believe that our team is more important than the patient. And I've had some arguments with some dentists about, what's more important. Is it, there's always three things. There's the dentist, there's the patient, and there's the team. And what order do you put them in? And for us, teamwork is first, and then the patient, and then the dentist should come last. It's hard for some dentists to swallow that because the ego gets in the way. But we should be the bottom of that.
Right. I mean, the premise behind that, right, is if you take care of your people take care of the patient. And if you have the team first approach, then by extension, you're going to have a lot of really well taken care of patients that have a great experience in your clinics. I've listened to you on a few different podcasts and read through some of the things that you have on LinkedIn as well. You guys really do take a different approach. One of the comments I've heard you make is, we didn't set out with a growth goal. And I talk to a lot of leaders of different DSOs, and oftentimes, a common question that I might ask is, well, what are your growth plans in the future? And there are already predefined plans, like, oh, well, we're at 15 clinics right now. We're going to grow to 50 over the next 24 or 36 months. And so a lot of the goals are, you almost have to work backwards of what's looking to be achieved. You kind of take a different approach and view it from a different angle. Can you talk through about how you think about growth?
Yeah, and I think it's important, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because here's the thing, right? Like, if you do things well, you naturally grow. I mean, that's you take care of a plant, you take care of your kids, like, what happens? Things naturally grow. And for us, if you set a predefined targets, and one of the things that's really interesting about our organization is we have no budgets, no targets, and no metrics inside the offices, right? I mean, obviously at the corporate structure, we have to, pay bills and make sure things are working. But when you take that out of a clinic, when you stop saying, hey, I need 20 clinics, because here's the thing, we have 18. If I say I need 20 by next year, what am I going to do? I'm going to go find something, hopefully. And if it doesn't meet the standard that I want, I'm like, well, hey, we need to keep growing. And all of a sudden standards start changing, right? Like, when we actually set ourselves sometimes these growth goals, we can't keep up with them. And then we have to either say, oh, I missed my goal, which never feels good, or I have to compromise my goal to say that I got there. And so for us, there is no growth goal. I mean, we have 18 clinics. And if, Mike, I talk to you next year and I have 18 clinics, we'll have been very successful. If we have 20 clinics, we'll also have been very successful. So it's not that we're opposed to growing. It's just not our main focus. Our focus is taking care of our team, taking care of our patients, and being, doing a really good job with the people that we have and the organization that we have. And guess what it's turned out to be? And this is the part that I think drives other DSOs slightly crazy, but they want to listen, but they don't, is that we're also the most profitable DSO in North America. And we don't focus on growth, and we don't focus on metrics, and we have no budgets, and we have no bonuses. Like, nobody in the organization gets paid a bonus.
Okay, I've heard you say that. Can we dig into that a little bit more? Because I'm really curious. Yeah, I run a revenue organization for a software company, and obviously there's incentives with bonuses and commissions. And I know that many DSOs and dental organizations, they create incentive systems for hitting certain goals or metrics or other things within the practice. Now, if you remove that, how are you maintaining motivation? And is there a way to reward somebody that in your mind is exceptional? Or is the expectation that everybody is?
So great question, right? And this is the part that we get into is like, so how does it actually work, right? Here's the thing. When you're in healthcare, and this is where I think our industries are different, even though you're in dental, I mean, you're selling software. And so there has to be a sales component to selling software. I mean, that literally is your job, is making sure people are, getting it, but also getting the service. We're in healthcare. And so if I set a target for my dentist to produce $4,000 a day, and he's at 3,500, can he make up 2 fillings to get there? Does he start like drilling on teeth that don't need, work done to hit the target so that he gets a bonus? Or the staff member is like, well, hey, if I charge extra for something that I did and or didn't do, I'll get paid more for it. And you start to focus on the numbers. And what we've done is we've said, hey, the only thing that's important is the patient. Why don't you just focus on the patient? So every time I have a conversation with the staff member, what am I talking about? Patient care. It's the only thing we're talking about. We never talk about, did you hit your numbers? It's patient care. Guess how they feel when the owner or and we have owners at every clinic. So the other thing is we have a partner at every clinic. So 18 offices, 18 partners. When the partner comes and talks to you and says, hey, you know what? I think we could do a little bit better on patient care by looking at this, this, and this. Now, ultimately, they may have an underlying thing of like, hey, this person might be underproducing. They might not be doing as well as they could be, but the conversation to the person is never about that, because it's about we need our patients. I'm seeing that we're not doing as much perio in this office. I'm seeing that. And if we're not doing as much perio, but I know we have the patients, that means we're under treating our patient. Our patient is not getting the best outcome from our office. Their health is not being taken care of. And ultimately, it's like, oh, yeah, well, we need to do more perio. Well, guess what happens when they do more perio? Ultimately, there's more production in the office, right? I mean, it does work, but the conversation is never about the production. And if you can keep that out of there, because here's what we also know, is that bonuses only work for year 1 and 2. And then after year 3, they're detrimental. Because if you hit a bonus every month, because you set these targets, and ultimately you want your staff to hit them. I mean, you don't want to set the targets that are unachievable, then it doesn't work. So if they start to hit them, and they hit them month 1, month 2, month 3, month 6, month 12, and then month 14, they don't hit it, guess what happens? It's actually a negative to the office. The motivation in the office actually goes backwards. So you gave them more money, they have to hit a target, they miss the target, and now all of a sudden they get paid less, even though they're not getting paid less. They're actually getting paid their hourly wage like normal. They didn't get their extra. The extra turns into an expectation. And so after a certain period of time, the extra turns into an expectation, and it's actually detrimental to organizations. And people don't realize that you're actually hurting yourself by putting bonuses in. It actually works negatively after a period of time.
Sure. So I track that. So is the premise then you pay a fair wage and everyone is compensated fairly where there is not the need for that extra?
So compensated fairly, and then you do other things. So ultimately, we spend a lot of time on team development and social responsibility. Guess what? People really like those things. And why do people stay at your organization? If they're going to leave for $2 an hour extra down the street, then let them go. That's what I tell people. I'm like, hey, if somebody's going to offer them a buck or two down the street and they go, it's not because they got the buck or two. It's because they don't like you. Because a dollar or two is not going to make a difference. If they're getting $10 down the street an hour, yeah, I mean, anybody's probably going to be leaving. At some point, the money will make a difference. But ultimately, dentistry's got these kind of like, I mean, we're in Alberta, we have our pay ranges, like, California, like everybody's got their own pay ranges. Every different city almost has like different, areas of pay. Your team has to be within the range. I'm not even saying they have to be at the high end of the range or they have to be within the range. The reason they then stay is everything else that you do on top of that. We close each office 3 days a year to do team development. And we never talk about dentistry. Those team developments have nothing to do with dentistry. They have to do with them as people. How can they be better people? Because if they're better people, they're going to take care of their family better, but they're going to take care of our patient better, and they're going to be a better employee and a better team member. So actually starting next Friday, we have our spring team development. And so, my topic is going to be around connection. It's like, how do we connect better? How do we make sure that we are better teammates, better people, better? Because if we connect better, guess what? Our patients feel that. And we support each other better. And if we support each other better, we're going to be more successful. And it's so simple because people complicate these situations like immensely. Like there's different levels. There's a piece of the pie approach to bonuses. There's a, target-based approach to bonuses. And what we did is we removed bonuses 13 years ago. We had them. We removed them 13 years ago and we grew exponentially since. And we've never looked back.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When you're talking about the closing your office for the 3 days a year, there's 3 different days, not consecutive?
Yeah, 3 different days. Yeah, January, then spring and fall.
Got it. And those are the TREC days. Is that?
Yeah. And so in January, we do a full TREC day, like all 18 offices, 220 people come together. We try to bring a bigger speaker in and do something like that. And then in spring and fall, we do like office space, like maybe we'll put 2 offices together. We used to do it office at a time, but my time suddenly like 18 times in the spring and 18 times in the fall turned out to be too much. So we try to put 2 offices together at a time. And so we do, 9 different team builds in spring and 9 different team builds in fall.
Got it. Okay, can you talk a little bit more about the structure of what goes on in those days? I know you're the theme here and you're going to speak it on connection. What else do you guys do?
This year we brought in James Nestor. He wrote the book Breath, like just fantastic speaker. And it actually was funny because it's talking about your overall health and breathing, but it actually does fall into dentistry a little bit, right? There's like some sort of dental connection. And then we do a social responsibility piece. So we put together 120 backpacks that went to the mustard seed here in Calgary. And so we had them actually show up, pick up the backpack, say a few words as to where these backpacks would be used, who would be getting them, how it's making a difference in people's lives. So they not only get to put it together, but they get to hear about how it affects other people's lives. We had somebody speak on nutrition, and then we had somebody speak on kind of mindset and happiness. And so that was our day.
Yeah, so it's kind of a holistic approach to the everyone on your team. It's not, like you said, it's not about dentistry. So you end up adding value in many other ways. And the breath one's interesting. I'm just curious, sidebar, do you do breath work yourself?
So, a little bit. I mean, obviously listening to James, I should probably do some more. I haven't got big into it, but it falls into the challenges that we have in our offices with a lot of our patients with like sleep apnea and just other things that we can help our patients be healthier. So ultimately we're training our teams to breathe better, but we're hoping that they're going to use that, practice it at home, and then, start to talk to our patients and say, hey, do you do this, box breathing, or do you do the different, timing on some of that stuff? Because it really does help, slow you down and refocus.
I have a lot of friends that are really big fans of breath work. I've done box breathing during cold plunging. This is really just an aside, but I think and it's awesome. It's supposed to really help you regulate if you're in an emotional moment or something else. I just find that when I'm in those moments, it's hard to remember like, oh yeah, I could do this other thing to help me feel better at this moment in time. But it's awesome to be training folks on different techniques that are available. Let's talk a little bit about, your passion for giving back. I heard you say, when you give back in this world, it gives back to you. And I thought that was an excellent statement. Can you kind of extrapolate on kind of your philosophy there?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. I think that, living in North America, we won the lottery, right? Whether you were born here or whether you moved here. I mean, we live in, some great countries. I'm going to say Canada might be a little better, but we live in some pretty great countries, and there's a lot that we get and we take advantage of. And so it's that gratitude piece is where we start. So we have to be thankful for what we have. And if we're thankful for what we have, then it turns around to being, well, if we have a lot, how can we help others? And again, being in dentistry, I mean, I've found it hard to find anybody who's been unemployed for longer than, a week of time if you're in dentistry. If you're in the dental industry, especially like on the assistant hygiene dentist side, I mean, there's always work to be done, or almost always work to be done. So we're very fortunate to be in an industry that continues to, through COVID, through good times and through bad times, does well. Sometimes we do better, sometimes we do not as well, but ultimately we're employed. And so we start from, hey, thanks for having that. Now, how do we help others? And here's the thing, right? When you do that, it's amazing what it does for you, right? I mean, we talk about this, and a lot of people can't come up with all the options, but what I always tell them is that when you help somebody, there's actually 4 interactions that take place. People are like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I help the person. So the person gets an advantage. Obviously, if we go do some dentistry in Guatemala, the person that had that abscess, they're feeling better. But of course, I get an advantage. Like for me, helping that person and that feeling that I get is unbelievable. And so that's the second person that gets, affected by it. The third and the fourth are the ones that people don't always understand. So the third one, and the interesting part about this is obviously some people see this, it's the community. So the community around that person gets affected. If we go help, a father or a mother, get rid of pain, well, now they can take care of the kids, or they can go to work, or they can do stuff that maybe they were being challenged by because of this dental pain or anxiety that they're having from that. So that's the third person that's helped. The fourth, and that's the interesting one, is the person that observes it. And this is the thing that I think people have the most challenge with, is that just by me talking to you about it or you watching me do some work, you actually feel good and you didn't do anything. Talking to somebody that's gone and helped somebody and changed the world somehow, and you listen to them, you're like, wow, that's amazing. Like, you feel good. So it does 2 things. It either motivates you to try to do that, or it just allows you to talk about it. But this is where people have to be willing to actually talk about the things that they do. Because often people will say, well, I'm anonymously, like, I don't want anybody to know. I'm just going to go and help other people. And then there's other people like, well, why do you post about it? Like, we already know you do good work. Why do you like have to let the rest of the world know? I'm like, because when I let the rest of the world know, my hope is that I motivate one other person to do something good, right? We were talking a little bit about Simon Sinek earlier. My why is motivating people to live well and give back. So through oral health, we can help them be healthier, but not just through oral health, through box breathing, through, we get them in our chair. And so we have an opportunity to teach them about, we try to talk about supplements with our patients too, and just very basic stuff like, a vitamin D and a multivite. Like, we're not going to get too far off the beaten path, but just basic stuff that can make a difference for our patients. So motivating people to live well, and then motivating people to go and do something. And, personal story, like, 10 years ago, I was in Peru on a volunteer trip, and lo and behold, there was this beautiful hygienist that was also on this volunteer trip. And, we started talking on the volunteer trip in Peru, and she happened to be from Edmonton, which is a 3-hour drive from Calgary. And fast forward 10 years later, I have a wife and 2 boys. And I met my wife, doing volunteer work in Peru. So it's like, you go with no expectation of getting anything back, and it's amazing what the world will give you.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I agree completely about the sharing of good things that are happening, especially it feels like in the world, everybody talks about how negative the news is and everything else. That third order effect that you're kind of talking about, where it makes somebody else feel good to see it. And, it can be contagious, and people can get reassurance that there are good things still happening out there. And hey, maybe I should do that too.
And the little things. So, we talked to a lot of dentists, fortunately, been, lecturing a little more the last little bit. And I'm like, look, if you can't give up 2 weeks of your life to go to Guatemala, because that's a big ask for a lot of people, right? I mean, people have families and the rest. I'm like, but what are you doing on a daily basis? So what we do is every 2 months, sometimes every 3, we do something in our office that's socially responsible. So this is, so we're in April, it's spring cleaning time, right? But we always talk to our staff, and then we come up with a joke. It's like, who wants to lose 5 or 10 pounds? I'm like, well, I want to lose 5, or who doesn't want to lose 5 or 10 pounds? And we're like, in your closet. And so we're on a spring cleaning drive where we get everybody to bring in 5 to 10 pounds of clothes. Now think about that. We have 200 people in the organization. We're getting 1,000 to 1,200, 1,000 to 2,000 pounds of clothes that we can then turn around, and we go and one of the other organizations we support here in Calgary is Women's in Needs Shelter, WINS. And we take that, and we take those clothes, and that now goes and helps somebody else, because we all have stuff in our closet that we bought that just never gets worn, right? And it actually helps our team, right? Like my wife right now is actually on spring cleaning mode. Like she's ripping the entire house apart and cleaning stuff up. Well, inevitably out of that comes a lot of stuff that's still in really good condition, just we're not using it anymore. And so I always tell docs, I'm like, you don't need to, it doesn't need to be massive. Just starting somewhere, doing something small with your team. They'll appreciate you for putting it together, but they'll also feel good about themselves helping others. And now we've taken that and we actually put it out on in our newsletter to our patients. And so we get patients now dropping off stuff at our offices that can be donated, right? So, I was just in Guatemala. We did a shoe drive. Man, we got like, I don't even know, somewhere between 400 and 600 pairs of shoes that were dropped off at our offices that we took in these big hockey bags down to Guatemala just because we asked, right? I mean, who's got kids' shoes that their kids are, I mean, kids grow out of shoes all the time. We've got all these shoes that no longer fit our kids. Give them to us so we can take them somewhere and they can be used. So try little things that make a difference for your teams. It's not that hard.
Do you notice that you get a large percentage of participation amongst your practices when you run these initiatives?
I mean, from our teams, absolutely. From our patients, a little hit and miss. I mean, it just depends if they were in that month and they saw the sign, because, there's our newsletters that go out. Not everybody reads all the newsletters, right? But if they were in the office in a close proximity of time, or, I'll put it on my social media, and so will a lot of the other teams. We have personal friends that sometimes not even patients. Like I had, my personal friends reach out and they're like, hey, can I just drop off something? I'm like, yeah, just go by any of the offices, drop it off. You don't have to be a patient to drop off stuff. But participation in our offices is really quite high, again, because this is the culture we build. When I interview people, and I still like to, as much as I can, interview every new hire that we have, at least in some capacity, I talk to them and I say, have you gone to our TREC website, our TREC Dental website? And I said, does it speak to you about anything? Because if you don't feel like these values are important, and if you don't feel like social responsibility is important, then you're probably good at your job, but this might not be the job for you, because my expectation is that you will participate. I can't require you to participate. I can't force you to participate, but I want you to join us, because I'm like, if it doesn't speak to you, there's 6 dentists down the road looking for staff, like, and they'll take you, but I want people that align with our values. And I spend 4 hours with every new hire in groups, obviously, but every quarter I do a 4-hour new employer orientation. And I go through everything that we do and why we think our values are important and how we live those values on a daily basis. And that's me. That's me spending the time with them, because one, I want a relationship with them, but I also want them to know what we're about and how we, walk the talk, right? Like how we don't just talk about it, but how we live it every single day. And then they live it, right? I mean, we were for a while pre-COVID. Unfortunately, this clinic won't open back up, but every Thursday we'd send a team of 4 down and do free dentistry at a clinic here in Calgary. 1 dentist, 1 hygienist, 1 assistant, 1 receptionist, and we just run that clinic for 7 hours every Thursday. And we had a lineup of our staff wanting to go down, and we didn't pay them. That was volunteer work, right? The clinic closed during COVID, and they just never opened this clinic back up again, so it's unfortunate. But for us, we have a lot of people that they drink the Kool-Aid like we do, and they believe in what we're doing because they've seen it and they feel good about it. And then they also know that it's like, we're doing this for our team and for our patients. It's not about the metrics. It's not about the numbers. People can feel when you're running an office for profitability, people can feel that.
You guys keep front and center your values, and your culture is very, very important to you. You point people to the website while they're in the interview process and the hiring process. You spend a lot of time with them post-hire. I have to imagine there are still times when the wrong person ends up in one of your clinics. What is your guys' approach to that? How do you handle that?
I mean, realistically, it's either, you train them up or you train them out, right? And it's kind of one of those pieces where they either get, on board and figuring it out, or they figure they don't fit. And nobody wants to be in an environment where they don't fit, right? I mean, that's actually a tough place to be, so staff turnover is real for everybody, right? I mean, it's real for us, it's real for other people. I mean, again, I'd say that we have less staff turnover. I don't always know what industry is doing with that, because these numbers, it changes so quickly. I think where we've been really lucky is trying to find new people. And it's because of the stuff that we put out there that they find us. I have 2 hygienists that want to work for us right now, and I have no room to put them. And, there's other, friends asking, and they're like people looking for hygienists all the time. But, we've got these people that are, I had a dentist just text me and he said, hey, my staff member is moving from Victoria Island to Calgary. I want her to work with you guys. Can you find her a job? And I'm like, I wish I don't have one right now, but I'll do it. Like, cause he's a friend of mine. It's like, hey, let's figure that out. But yeah, when people don't fit, I mean, yeah, ultimately they get let go. I mean, that's, it's part of doing business. I mean, for us, doing dentistry, being a good hygienist is only one aspect of being part of our team. And this is where, when we have partners at every office, and I think ultimately it's so important. And people think we're crazy, but our partners own 50% of their offices, and it's not a 51-49. I talk about clinics almost like kids, and partners almost like significant others. And if you go to your wife or husband and you're like, well, I'm 51% and you're 49% of this relationship, how are they going to feel? So when we go in with our partners, it's 50-50. If they don't need us, or we don't need them, or there's some sort of problem, it's going to end badly. Because I own 1% more or 10% more doesn't mean that it ends better. It still ends badly. You know what I mean? If it's not going to work out. And we've been lucky. I mean, we've offboarded 2 practices, but both of the partners are still friends of mine. We'll still go out for drinks and hang out. It just, the cultures didn't line up, and they wanted to run their practice differently than the way we wanted to. And they were still doing great quality dentistry. They just felt that, the way that we do a new patient experience, the way that we do different things, they wanted to do it differently. And we said, fine, but we don't want to do it differently. And so we'd rather you not be in the organization than be in the organization and do it differently. And so again, you walk where you talk. It's like, we're willing to let clinics go because of that situation, right? I mean, either take them in or offboard them in that situation, because we want it to be done right. And again, these were great people. They did not do anything wrong. It's just the way that we were doing things were different. And we're particular about the way we do things because we think that these systems work really well.
Now, you grew up in a dental family. Can you share a little bit about, your mom and dad and how they shaped you, and kind of how that experience has really created what you've ultimately built today?
All the credit goes to them ultimately, right? I mean, without having a dad that was an amazing dentist and a mom that was, honestly an amazing office manager, if she was better at speaking on stage, she'd be, competing with any of these guys in terms of how to run a really good practice. I mean, she figured it out. She knew what to do. She understood it. She was also a dental assistant. Well, she put herself through dental assisting school so she could also help dad in the back when she needed to. But yeah, we started humbly in that scenario. Dad opened a clinic in 1981. So 43 years ago, May. So actually, next month it'll be 43 years. And there was mom and dad. Mom was the assistant and the receptionist. Dad was the dentist and the hygienist. I mean, that was it. And we still have a clinic in that same plaza. Actually, where I'm speaking from right now is the same plaza. It's just a different office that we have now. We've been in this place for 43 years. But, learning from dad how to talk to people, how to treat patients, how to remember names. He's still much better than I am. I'm really not good at remembering people's names. And, if you want a conversation around that, Simon Sinek has a great podcast. I don't know who called him out on it, but there was Simon's like, I don't remember people's names very well. And the guy who's talking to said, no, you just don't care. And he's like, what do you mean? That's offensive. And he's like, if it was your biggest job in the world that you were about to go do, would you remember the name of the person that you just met, or the girl that you were wanting to marry? Would you remember their name? And it's like, well, yeah, I'd remember their name. So if you don't remember the other people's names, you just don't care.
Was that part of his bit of optimism?
It is, but I can't remember which one, because it is. I mean, I love listening to a bit of optimism, but somebody called him out on it. He wasn't the one. He was like, they're like, you're not bad at remembering names. You just don't care. And that sat with me because I'm bad at remembering names, and my dad is really good at remembering names. And it's like, well, there's about a caring, but he taught us how to, take care of people, put the patient first. The 1 hour new patient experience. So we don't call it a new patient exam. We call it a new patient experience. Every dentist spends 1 hour with every new patient before they see the hygienist. So if you want to be a patient at our office, you got to give us 2 hours. 1 hour with the dentist, 1 hour with the hygienist. And that dentist cannot double book their time. We've got a whole system. It's a whole nother podcast on how to do a good new patient exam. Actually, I said I'm coming down to Phoenix. That's what I'm actually talking about, is just how to talk to patients better. But learning that, and then learning from mom how to run the business, because dentistry is a business. Ultimately, as much as we say it is or isn't, we're in healthcare, but we're absolutely in a business, and we need to know how to run a really good business. And so learning from mom, just all those things, this is where people are like, oh man, it's like, I want to do what you did. And I'm like, I did this for 43 years, even though, I'm 44 years old right now, but like, I didn't just figure this out on my own. I mean, I had a lot of help. And then when things go sideways, you always have your parents to back you up. If there's a dentist that you're short, you got a dad that could go in and help you. Most other people that are trying to grow, they don't have that level of support. And so that's where I think I was just really lucky. I had that level of support that allowed us to do more. But, the volunteering came from dad as well. It was always part of the community. It was always part of something that he did. So when people are like, why do you like to volunteer? I'm like, volunteering in our family wasn't a choice. It was an expectation. We were expected to give back to people through our community, through our kind of religious community, and through our family. It was never a, would you like to give back? It was, you need to. This is just part of your life, is making sure that you give back. And so it trains you differently to think about it as a way of being, not something that would be nice to do.
That's great. I've heard you talk about hard work, and I've yet to meet anybody that has become successful that did not have the willingness to put in the time and the effort and the hours. You have two young children, two little boys, right?
Yeah, 3 and 5, yeah.
3 and 5? Okay.
Yeah.
I've got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old, both boys as well. And there's I have a hard time framing this sometimes, because I think there's such a notion in culture today of work-life balance, and that it's almost something that you are owed, or that, like, if you don't have work-life balance, it's a bad thing because you're effectively sacrificing what you have at home or with your children or with your family for the pursuit of a career or excellence in something else. And I struggle with that immensely. And I'd just be curious, like, as you're thinking about, raising these two boys, and your background where you've clearly put the time, the effort, and the work, you're flying all over, you're doing talks and seminars with folks. How do you think about work-life balance? What does it mean to you? And what is the advice that you're going to give to your kids in that regards?
That's a tough one. And I'm with you. Like, there's no perfect way to do this, because it's like, you look at your kids and you're like, I want all the time with them, but I love what I do. Like, I love what I do. I'm working 6-7 days a week, because there's always, when you own the business, it never stops working. So I actually, and funny enough, one of our team builds, I actually, this is the concept that I talked about, but I actually framed it differently. I talked about work-life imbalance and intentional work-life imbalance, because here's what we know as we go through life. What is work-life balance? Does it mean working out 4 days a week, going to work for 6 or 7 hours, 8 hours, and then spending the rest of your time as your family? Well, what if you don't have a family? That balance is going to be completely different than having 2 kids. And so we have to be intentional in our imbalance. So like starting a business, doing a business, me, like, I know I need to make time for my kids, but does that mean that I'm going to make 3 hours a day for my kids? No, I mean, it's not going to be possible sometimes, but I need to be intentional with the way I set up my life, because a lot of people just live life and they just like let life control them. And then, things happen, and then they just let things, dictate their time. And let me tell you, I'm not great at this yet, but the whole intention about it is that you set the time aside for the right things, and then you do the work outside of it. And so for me, I'll be lecturing, and now sometimes I'll get my wife and my kids to come, and I'll just lecture for a day, and then I'll spend the next 3 days holidaying with them. Because, if we go down to Phoenix, it'll be cool. I mean, this time I don't think I'm going to take the kids, but, recently I did. And the kids, they came and met me, and we did that. It's taken the time away to make sure they have quality time, and then it's working really hard. And yeah, I mean, I struggle with this, because it's like, I use my phone all the time because I'm not seeing patients as much, right? I'm a dentist that sees patients 1 day a week. The rest of the time, people need to get a hold of me. And so I've warned my wife and I've warned my kids, even though they're young. I'm like, when we travel, we get to travel because I take my phone with me. Because if I don't take my phone with me, then I have to be in Calgary. And so my phone is going to control a portion of my life, but I'll do my best to not. And that's my biggest struggle is my phone. I need to be a little more intentional. And my wife will tell you this too, is that from like 6 to 8 p.m. to like just put the phone somewhere else where I can't see it, and take my smartwatch off so it still won't beep at me. And I'm not great at that. I mean, I could do better at that, but it's making quality time. Last week we spent spring break with the kids. When I get out of town, I'm much better with my kids than when I'm in town. And so I know that as well. And so I know that I've got to try to make, even just slightly out of town, just going to Banff and going hiking for the day with the kids, or, doing something like that. I'm so much more intentional when I'm not at home, because otherwise the TV shows up and, I put the 49ers game or the Giants game on, and all of a sudden you're distracted. Right. And I love watching sports. So that's a distraction for me.
Yeah, the phone it's an interesting one too, because, when I grew up, my dad was an attorney growing up, and he had his own practice, and he would always bring work home, but it was all a bunch of file folders, and he'd be sitting at the dining room table with just stacks of filed folders in his dictaphone, dictating different messages, but he was working. It wasn't like being distracted on something else. It was very clearly work related. And now with the phone, you never actually know, is this something that you're doing for work? Are you catching up on a sports score? Are you doing something else? Am I scrolling through X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it? And so I reflect on what example am I giving to my children? For my dad, it was an example of being a hard worker, because it was very clear what he's doing. For my kids, I think sometimes they're like, oh, is dad just goofing off? And sometimes I am. It becomes this kind of challenging dynamic there. I agree with you. It's really tough. I will say one notion that I'm kind of toying with in my head is the kind of removing the work-life balance and just focusing more on quality of life. And because when I hear a lot of what you're sharing, it's it's a good quality of life. You're still affording these opportunities to go and travel different places together. And, part of the benefit of the effort that you put in and day out is that you can have your family come and join you if you're, lecturing or doing something else. And that is a direct result of that effort that's put in, from the unbalanced work-life situation.
Exactly. And it's just figuring that out, right? And everybody does it differently. And this is where I think society tells you what you should do, but for everybody, it's going to be different. And it's not judging other people, because some people, money's a little tighter. They got to work 2 or 3 jobs to get there. And it's look at what our parents did. I look back at my parents and grandparents, and they had to sacrifice more than we did. We're living a better life because of them. So yeah, they did work a little harder, but because of that, we live a better life. And so hopefully if we work hard, our kids will live a better life, right? Ultimately, but hopefully they'll live a responsible life as well. Because, I think the other challenge that I always try to figure out is how am I going to make my kids still see that social responsibility is important? That, you can't just go traveling all the time, because they'll be like, hey, dad, when's our next trip? And it's it's just a funny conversation that you're having with your kids, is that's what they're asking about. It's trying to build that hard work and that work ethic into their lives as well. Right. Because I think I think our generation's biggest challenge is going to be getting our kids to work as hard as our parents did.
I agree completely. And I'd be curious, are you seeing that? I always also am concerned about coming across as the old guy that's oh, the kids these days, this generation, I don't want to be that either. And I can completely appreciate that every generation is different. Things change over time. There's progress that is always happening. We have to be accepting of the different things that are available now that were not available before. But as you look at new dentists coming out of school and new folks that join your practices, do you find that it's more challenging to get buy-in, and how do you work through that?
Way more challenging, right? And in terms of what does hard work look like? When I joined my dad, I worked 6 days a week. It was Monday through Friday, and we were open every Saturday, and that's what we did to get me going. And now you get these dentists coming out of school, and they're like, I want 4 days, no Saturdays, no evenings. And you're like, man, you got to work hard. And so it's trying to find that middle ground, right? And this is what I talk with my team a lot. It's well, they've figured out something that we didn't and our parents' generation didn't. But at the same time, we figured out something that they didn't, because through our hard work, we were really successful. But we also gave up a bit of that balance and a bit of that fun and a bit of that to work really hard. And they're looking at it and they're saying, I kind of want my weekends, or I want my evenings, or I want to do these fun things. And so to us, how we've pivoted a little bit. One thing that we always did is we always close our offices, no later than 6 p.m. So we don't do evenings. 6 p.m. is still kind of an evening, but we all have kids to go home. And even when I didn't have kids, the offices just close. We don't run 2 shifts at any office. So everybody starts and finishes at the same time. I can go into the metrics of why that's important. But what we've changed over the last number of years is each office is only open 2 Saturdays a month. So we're not open 4 Saturdays anymore, and we're not open past 6 p.m. And so we do tell our teams, look, we know that people don't love giving up their Saturdays, but we're going to ask for 1 or 2 of them. Sometimes we can get half the team on one or half the team on the other. And sometimes we need everybody, depending if it's a new office and how many staff members we have. but we're not going to work 4 Saturdays. We're never going to ask anybody to work 4 Saturdays. So, we cut back the number of Saturdays. I mean, again, did we really have a choice? Kind of not, because couldn't find anybody to work those Saturdays. But, and in giving the evenings back to people is also, kind of important. And so, we try to close at 5 some days, 4 some days, and 6 some days. So it's like, some days they'll get home early and they can spend more time with the kids. And some days they'll get home a little later, but, hopefully everybody can still tuck their kids in, right? I mean, that's kind of ultimately my goal is that, your kids are going to bed at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. At least you're home, if you want to, every night be home to put them to bed, right? Even if you work till 6. So it's trying to figure out how to balance that. But at the same time, I talk to people and I'm like, if you tell me that's all you want to work, you probably just won't work here. And I'm honest with people because I'm like, look, I had to work pretty hard for where I got. And it doesn't mean you have to work as hard as I did. I wanted to. But what you need to understand, and this is, I think society has created this problem for us, that the weekend is Saturday, Sunday. But why? Like if I get a Wednesday off work, it's actually pretty cool because there's like appointments with doctors and dentists and lawyers and things that I can do that I can't do on Saturday or Sunday. And so we also tell our staff, it's like, hey, we want our average person working 4.5 days a week. So 4 days during the week and a couple of Saturdays. That'd be a perfect schedule. You're going to get a day off during the week as well. Go do something cool on that day. Now, again, if you have kids, that doesn't always work, but not everybody does. And a lot of people are, single and doing their own thing and, they can get a lot of stuff done, but you can also go skiing on a Wednesday and guess what? There's nobody on the mountain. So we try to manage it that way. But yes, if somebody's like, absolutely not, I'm going to come in and I'm never going to work a Saturday. I mean, we're just not going to hire them. And we're going to talk to them about it. And I think, again, our teams see how hard we work. And I think that ends up being part of it, but it is harder, but I think that they're seeing something that we aren't. So that's where it's like, I'll get into those rants every once in a while. Oh, this next generation, they just don't want to work hard. And then you sit back and you're like, but they're living life a little bit better, right? Because my mom will say that to me sometimes. She's like, come on, like you guys are doing this and you're doing this. It's like, what about this, right? And it's like, well, Mom, I work hard. Like I want to take some time off. Right. And that was obviously a conversation she was having with me about 10 years ago. Now that we have kids, she's like, spend as much time as you can with them. Right. So, but when I was single and I didn't have kids, she's like, hey, you're going to Phoenix and you're going to Vegas. And it's like, is that all that necessary? And I'm like, well, no, I'm balancing. That's my balance, right? Like that's getting out of town and doing those things. So I think the next generation has probably got it better than we did to some extent. And they're seeing life a little bit differently, but also we need to make sure that they still work hard because the people that work hard ultimately will be the most successful. You haven't found a lot of, entrepreneurs that are doing really well that didn't work 60, 80 hours a week to figure out how to get there. And so I think, some of those people will never be that successful, but that's probably okay for them. They want to be the associate for the rest of time and they want to make their couple $100K and they're good to go. And that we need those people too.
Right. No, absolutely. I do think it does afford a real opportunity for people that do want to work hard and outwork everyone. They're going to have some really great opportunities to excel as a result of that. Last question. I really appreciate the conversation. You've mentioned Simon Sinek a few times. You mentioned the Breathe book. Where do you go to learn? What are some of the podcasts you like to listen to and books that you've read? Any recommendations?
Yeah. So, a bit of optimism is my favorite still. I really do appreciate Simon Sinek and what he does. I've read all of his books. So start with why I think is fundamental for a lot of people. And then Leaders Eat Last too, in terms of just, how important things are, the infinite mindset. But if you want to talk about the whole bonus thing, the whole motivation thing, I always give this book to a lot of people. It's called Drive by Daniel Pink. So it's, pink, like the color and drive, just like you're driving a car. And then the other one that I think is instrumental is Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of Team. The pyramid of trust, right? Ultimately, that's what I think, we base that new employee orientation is, a whole hour of it is based around that pyramid of trust and how we need to build the right relationships, vulnerability, right? Like doing those things. So that's another one. Good to Great by Jim Collins. I'm a big fan of that too. Just how technology is the accelerator, but it doesn't make you different. Like it's not the reason that you're going to be successful, but it's going to help you be more successful. And we're big on technology. We have, intraoral scanners in every office. We don't take impressions at all. Like, a lot of digital workflow and CBCTs in almost every office. And then, some of the other stuff on the health side, like Mark Hyman. I don't know if you've heard of him, but, just some good functional medicine stuff that just, makes you think a little bit different about how we treat our bodies because ultimately we need to move. right? I mean, we need to move every day. And I was much better at it. COVID kind of got me out of a habit that has been really hard to get back into. I used to own a CrossFit gym. I was actually a certified level 1 CrossFit trainer, and we had a gym for 10 years. And then during COVID, that gym didn't do that well. And so ultimately we shut it down a few years ago. And it got me out of that. And that's a big motivating factor for me. I'm doing better, but I want to continue to do better and continue to move a little bit more. And so, managing your mental, managing your physical, and managing what you're putting in your body. Cause we got a lot of, our food out there is just unfortunately really not good for you. So we've got to be careful.
Are you familiar with Peter Attia?
I've heard the name, but no, I haven't watched that or heard of.
I think he has his own podcast as well. I came across him first with Tim Ferriss, but he's a physician. He has kind of a whole concept of lifespan versus health span. Health span being like how long during the portion that you live that you're actually healthy and being able to do the things that you want to do, and having that being of predominant importance over your actual lifespan. But he wrote a book. It's called Outlive, which is really good.
My wife, I think, picked that up. Yeah, I've heard it's amazing. It's on my list of things to read.
Awesome. Very cool. Last question for you. What are you most excited about in dental, within your practice, your business, just kind of anything that you're really looking forward to right now?
Honestly, like the opportunity and something like this, as crazy as it sounds, the opportunity to talk to more people about how we can do it better. Like, I do think dentistry is still one of the best industries to be in. I think we're so lucky to be in here, but I think that the way that we're necessarily organizing our organizations, the DSO, I think the DSO market is very important. I think they're doing some fantastic things like Pacific Dental down in the U. But I think that there's some that maybe aren't doing it as well. And I think if we can, focus dentistry to take care of the patient and take care of the team and then be successful and not engineer it backwards, like, I think there might be a few too many MBAs and a few too many lawyers involved in dentistry right now. I think we need them. I think ultimately they're super important. I don't think that they should be running the organizations. I think the dentists should be running the organization with a team or partners or business partners that fill that role out. But I'm excited. I think dentistry is still going to do some amazing things. And I think that we ultimately have the best opportunity to make people healthier because we see people more than anybody else, more than doctors, more than, people come into the dentist 2 to 3 times a year and we get to see them like physically in person. And so I think that we have such an opportunity to make people healthier, but I think we need to do a better job of talking about it, that mouth, body connection, like these conversations that we're having about health and breathing and the rest. Can we get our teams that, enticed or that excited about it, that they're going to pass that knowledge on? Or how else can we pass that knowledge on? Because I think the dentist has a huge opportunity. So I still love dentistry. I think we still got a great opportunity to go. And then, of course, family's a big part. And so just watching my kids grow is exciting. And, seeing my older guy get into grade 1, I mean, that's going to be a big step next year. So
that's awesome. Well, very well said, and congratulations. And thank you so much for joining the podcast. Really appreciated the conversation.
Yeah. And thanks for your time. Thanks for having me.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.